Chapter 1. The Lease. Sylvie Brooks had been living with a vampire for 6 weeks before she noticed anything strange, which said less about her powers of observation and more about the state of her life. In her defense, she had just started her 3rd year of behavioral psychology, she was waitressing 4 nights a week, and her previous roommate had left owing 2 months' rent and taking the shower curtain. When the ad she posted on the University Housing Board was answered within 40 minutes by a man who paid 3 months in advance, in cash, and asked only whether the windows had blackout curtains, Sylvie did not ask follow-up questions. She probably should have asked follow-up questions. "You label the eggs," she said on the 7th morning, standing in the kitchen doorway in an oversized t-shirt, watching him write on the carton in handwriting that belonged in a museum. "Individually. They have a use-by date." "The carton has a use-by date. You're writing it on each egg." "The carton can be discarded. The egg cannot reference a discarded carton." Sylvie stared at him. Ambrose Winter was 24, allegedly. He was tall, precise in a way that made her feel like she'd been assembled from spare parts, and he dressed for the supermarket the way other people dressed for court. Dark coat, dark trousers, dark everything. He wore a silver signet ring on his right hand that looked older than the building, and he had arrived with 2 suitcases and no personal photographs. And within a week, every surface in the apartment was labeled, organized, and wiped down with something that smelled like expensive nothing. He also never ate. "I have a sensitive stomach," he said the first time she noticed. "You've had a sensitive stomach for 6 weeks. It is a persistent condition." "Ambrose, I have literally never seen you eat a single thing." He paused with the pen above the 9th egg. I eat at unusual hours. You are not always present." "I'm present a lot. I'm present right now. Want some cereal?" "No." "Toast?" "No." "One of the eggs you've just catalogued?" "I appreciate the offer." He capped the pen. "I have eaten." He had not eaten. She was almost sure of it. But he paid rent on time, and he'd replaced her broken bookshelf with something that looked like it cost more than her car, so she let it go. She let a lot of things go with Ambrose. The fact that he deep-cleaned the bathroom at 3 in the morning. The fact that she had never once seen him in direct sunlight. The fact that his hands, when she'd accidentally brushed them reaching for the same mug, were so cold she'd actually flinched. "Poor circulation," he'd said. "You should see a doctor." "I have seen many doctors." A pause. They were not helpful. The thing about Ambrose, the thing that made her let all of it slide, was that he was trying so hard to be normal that it circled back around to being the most abnormal thing she'd ever witnessed. He went to lectures. He took notes in a leather-bound journal with a fountain pen. He stood in line at the campus coffee shop and ordered a black coffee he never drank, because, he explained with perfect seriousness, one must participate in the social rituals of one's environment. "You're not drinking it." "I am holding it. Holding it is participation." "Ambrose." "The warmth is pleasant. I'm told that is the primary function." She'd laughed so hard she'd spilled her own coffee. He'd watched her laugh with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not amusement exactly, something older and more careful than amusement. She was still figuring him out when she came home on a Tuesday night and found him on the kitchen floor. It was 11:30. Her shift at the restaurant had run late because a table of 8 had ordered dessert at closing time, and her manager was a coward. She was thinking about nothing more complicated than whether she had clean pajamas when she opened the apartment door and saw him. He was sitting against the kitchen cabinet. Not sitting exactly. More like he'd been standing and then wasn't. His skin, always pale, had gone the color of paper. His eyes were closed. His hands were flat on the tile floor, and they weren't moving, and Sylvie had spent enough time around him to know his hands were always moving, always organizing, always adjusting something. Ambrose? Nothing. She dropped her bag and crossed the kitchen. Up close, he looked worse. His lips were nearly white, the veins at his temples were visible, blue dark, and she could see a fine tremor in his jaw. Hey, she crouched beside him. Ambrose, what happened? Are you hurt? Did you fall? His eyes opened. They were darker than she'd ever seen them. Not his usual gray, something beneath that. Something that looked at her and then looked away very deliberately. You should not, he said, be this close to me right now. You're on the floor. I am aware of my location. You look like you're dying. I am not dying. I am under-resourced. Under-resourced. She reached for his wrist to check his pulse. His skin was ice. She pressed her fingers to the inside of his wrist and felt nothing. No beat, no flutter, nothing. She kept her fingers there for 10 seconds, 15, 20. Ambrose, she said slowly, you don't have a pulse. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. That, he said quietly, is correct. She sat back on her heels. Her brain, trained by 3 years of behavioral psychology to observe patterns and draw inferences, began assembling every anomaly she had filed away over the past 6 weeks into a single, coherent, completely insane conclusion. No food, no pulse, cold hands, no sunlight, up at 3 a.m, looks 24, talks like someone who has been alive for a very long time. You're not 24, she said. No. And the sensitive stomach. There is no stomach condition. And the doctors who weren't helpful. They were helpful for other patients. I was merely observing their technique. She exhaled. Then she did something that surprised both of them. She sat down next to him on the kitchen floor and leaned her back against the cabinet. When did you last eat, whatever it is you eat? He was quiet for a long moment. 11 days. Ambrose. I was managing. The management has become less effective. What do you need? He turned his head to look at her. The dark in his eyes shifted, and for a half-second she saw something in them that was not human. Not threatening exactly. Hungry, in a way that was older and more precise than any hunger she had a word for. You are remarkably calm, he said. I'm panicking internally. I'm just also a waitress, so I can panic and still function. What do you need? Blood. She absorbed this. Human blood? It does not have to be human, but human is. He stopped. I should not be having this conversation while in this state. You should absolutely be having this conversation because you're on the floor and you look terrible. Do you have any? Blood? I had a supply. It ran out 4 days ago. I was going to source more. I was attempting to manage the interval. You were starving yourself because you ran out and didn't want to deal with it? I was optimizing the timeline. You were being an idiot, she stood up. I'm going to the store. The store does not sell blood. I know the store doesn't sell blood, Ambrose. But you're sitting on my kitchen floor, looking like a Victorian ghost painting, and I need to do something, so I'm going to the store. She went to the store. At midnight, for a vampire. What kind of blood? She'd asked before leaving. The question is appreciated. The answer is not something the store can provide. I'm improvising. She bought every red drink on the shelves. Cranberry juice, tomato juice, pomegranate, strawberry Yakult, a bottle of red wine, beet juice, which she was not even sure was a real product that people consumed voluntarily. She came back with 4 bags and set them on the counter in front of him. He stared at the collection. Sylvie. I didn't know what would work. None of this will work. The pomegranate is organic. Something happened to his face then. The careful, composed, catalog everything expression cracked, and for the first time in 6 weeks, Ambrose Winter looked at her like a person rather than a situation to be managed. His mouth did something that was almost, very nearly, on the edge of being a smile. "You went to the store," he said. "I went to the store. At midnight. For a vampire. I went to the store at midnight for my roommate who happens to be going through some things." He looked at the row of bottles. At the Yakult. At her. "I need to make a phone call," he said. "To someone who can deliver what I actually require. And then I believe we should discuss the terms of our lease." "Damn right we should." Chapter 2. The Rules. The blood arrived at 2 a.m. in an insulated medical bag carried by a woman who looked like she could bench press the building. She didn't speak. She didn't come inside. She handed the bag to Ambrose at the threshold, looked at Sylvie standing in the hallway behind him, and said, "You told a human." "She's my roommate." "You have a roommate?" It was an economic necessity. The woman stared at him with an expression of such profound weariness that Sylvie felt a sudden kinship with her. "Renaud is going to lose his mind," the woman said, and left. Ambrose closed the door. He didn't explain who Renaud was. He opened the insulated bag and took out one of the pouches inside and drank it standing at the kitchen counter with the same expressionless composure he applied to labeling eggs. Sylvie watched. She expected it to be disgusting. It wasn't. It was weirdly clinical, like watching someone take medicine, except that the color came back to his face in real time. His eyes shifted from that dark, hollow shade back to their normal gray, and his hands stopped trembling. "Better?" she said. "Considerably." "Good, sit down. We're making rules." He sat. She sat across from him at the kitchen table with a notebook and the red marker she used for exam revision. "Rule 1, she said. "No starving yourself in the apartment. If you run out, you tell me, and you call whoever that woman was. Her name is Brigitte." "Great, you call Brigitte." "I don't enjoy calling Brigitte." "Nobody enjoys calling Brigitte. That's not relevant. Rule 2, you tell me the truth about what you are and what the actual constraints are. No more sensitive stomach. No more poor circulation." "Agreed." Rule 3, I can ask you anything and you answer honestly. A pause. "Within reason." "Within my reason, not yours." Another pause, longer. "Agreed." Rule 4, she tapped the pen. "No ancient enemies in the kitchen." "I don't have ancient enemies." The woman said someone named Renaud was going to lose his mind. That sounds like an ancient enemy. Something shifted in his face. The composure didn't crack, but it went very still, stiller than a person went. "Renaud is not an enemy. He searched for the word. He is the person who made me what I am." "He turned you." "Yes." "Are you on good terms?" "I left him 40 years ago." He considers this a personal failure. Whose personal failure? His. Mine. The distinction is not clear to him. Sylvie wrote Renaud in the margin and circled it twice. "Rule 5, she said. If Renaud or anyone else from your previous life shows up, you warn me. You do not handle it alone and disappear. We are roommates. Roommates communicate." I have never had a roommate before. I can tell. Rule 6. You replace the furniture you've already replaced back to what it was. The bookshelf was structurally unsound. It was from IKEA. Those are synonymous. Ambrose. I will keep the bookshelf. Everything else can be discussed. She narrowed her eyes. He looked back at her with the composed patience of someone who had been alive long enough to know that most negotiations ended eventually if you simply refused to concede. Fine, she said. But if you replace anything else without asking, I get to pick the next piece of furniture. Agreed. Even if it's from IKEA. The expression on his face was so carefully neutral that she almost laughed. Even, he said, with the gravity of a man signing a treaty, if it is from IKEA. Over the next 3 weeks, Sylvie learned the following. Ambrose was 182 years old. He had been turned during the retreat from Moscow in 1812 by a French vampire named Renaud, who had found him bleeding in the snow and decided, without asking, that he was worth preserving. What were you before? She asked, sitting cross-legged on the kitchen counter while he restocked the blood pouches in the small fridge he'd purchased the day after the kitchen floor incident. A soldier. For which side? The losing one. He placed the last pouch precisely on the shelf. I was 19. I had been in the army for 11 months. I was not a remarkable soldier. And Renaud just, found you? He found me bleeding in a field outside Smolensk. I was going to die within the hour. He decided that I would not. Did he ask? I was unconscious. So, no. She watched him close the fridge door. He straightened. The kitchen light caught the angles of his face, and for a moment he looked exactly like what he was, which was not 24, and not human, and not entirely at home in a kitchen with linoleum flooring and a fruit-shaped calendar on the wall. Do you wish he hadn't? She asked. I used to. For the first 50 years, consistently. For the next 50, intermittently. Now, he considered. Now I label eggs. I attend lectures on research methodology. I have a roommate who buys me pomegranate juice. The question has become less relevant. She noticed he drank the blood with his back to her for the first week. By the second week, he drank it at the table, but quickly, like medicine. By the third week, she was sitting across from him while he held the pouch and she held her coffee, and neither of them mentioned it. Does it taste like anything? She asked once. Yes. Are you going to elaborate? It is difficult to describe to someone who does not have the reference frame. Try. He thought about it. When you eat something and it reminds you of a place, a meal your mother made, the specific afternoon you associate with a flavor. Blood is like that, but the memory is someone else's. Not words, not images, just who they were for a moment. She was quiet for a long time. That's beautiful, and also deeply unsettling. Both of those responses are correct. He did not sleep. He could remain motionless for hours. He heard her heartbeat from every room in the apartment and could tell from its rhythm whether she was studying, anxious, or eating something she enjoyed. That is incredibly invasive, she told him. I cannot turn it off. I have tried. How long have you been listening? Since day one. You could have mentioned this. You were eating an alarming amount of cereal. I didn't want to draw attention to it. The cereal is a coping mechanism. I am aware. Your heart rate is most consistent during cereal consumption. Please stop. I am making an observation. Observe quieter. He could not enter a private dwelling without invitation. This was the part that concerned him most. You invite people into the apartment, he said, and for the first time she heard something in his voice that sounded like genuine alarm. Frequently, without warning. They're my friends. They are humans who walk through an unguarded threshold with your verbal permission. That's what inviting someone over means, Ambrose. If you invite the wrong person, I cannot uninvite them. She paused. The wrong person being another vampire, one you do not recognize as such. Your invitation extends to anyone who presents as human. Are there other vampires at university? I don't know. That is the problem. She started texting him before inviting anyone over. He started checking the hallway before she opened the door. It was the first thing that felt less like a roommate arrangement and more like something else. Something where they were on the same side of a problem that nobody else could see. He helped her study at night. He had, it turned out, an excellent memory, which she found unremarkable until she realized he was quoting her textbook from editions that had been published before she was born. That reference is outdated, she said, looking up from her laptop. Bowlby's been reframed significantly since the 90s. I read the original in 1969. You read John Bowlby in 1969. Attachment theory was relevant to my interests at the time. What interests could a vampire have in attachment theory? He didn't answer. He turned a page in the book he was reading, but something about the way he didn't answer told her more than most people's answers did. She taught him to use the self-checkout machine on a Sunday afternoon in October, and it nearly ended their friendship. "It is asking me for my loyalty card," he said, standing in front of the screen with the focused displeasure of a man being personally insulted. "You don't have a loyalty card, press skip." "There is no skip. There is not today or sign up now." "Press not today." "I refuse. Not today implies I may obtain one in the future. I will not obtain one. There should be an option for never." "Ambrose, there are people behind us. Then they can witness my objection." "Scan the eggs." He scanned the eggs. The machine said, "Unexpected item in bagging area." He looked at the machine. He looked at Sylvie. He looked at the machine again. "It's rejecting the eggs," he said. "I weighed them, they are the correct weight." "It does that, just lift them and put them back." He lifted the eggs, he placed them back. "Unexpected item in bagging area." "This machine," he said, "is broken." "It's not broken, it's just bad." "There is no distinction." "Ambrose. I have existed for 182 years. I have survived wars, famine, 2 continental collapses, and 40 years of Renault. I will not be defeated by a grocery machine." The attendant came over. Ambrose explained the situation with the same careful dignity he applied to everything, as though the self-checkout was a diplomatic incident between sovereign nations. The attendant cleared the error without looking at the screen. "Does it do that often?" Ambrose asked. "Every time," the attendant said, already walking away. Ambrose stared after him. "Every time," he repeated quietly. "And they continue to use it. Welcome to modern life. I would like to go home now." "You haven't paid yet." "I will pay. And then I would like to go home. And then I would like to sit in a dark room and process what has happened to civilization." She took him home. He sat on the sofa. She made tea, which he did not drink, and sat next to him. "You survived wars," she said. "Yes." "Continental collapses." 2. "But the self-checkout is what broke you." He looked at her. His expression was perfectly level. "The self-checkout did not break me. I am simply recalibrating my expectations for the century." She laughed. He watched her laugh, and for the second time, she saw that expression on his face. Not amusement. Something that looked like amusement had walked into the room, and amusement had stood up to make space for it. Chapter 3. The Threshold. It happened slowly, the way most dangerous things did. She stopped closing her bedroom door. He started leaving a cup of tea on her desk, at exactly the hour she usually sat down to study, timed to the minute, brewed to the strength she preferred, which he had apparently calibrated over 11 days without asking her once. "How do you know how I take my tea?" she asked. "Observation." "Observation of what? I didn't tell you." "You wince at strong tea. You add milk until the color matches a specific shade. You have done this 43 times. The shade is consistent." You've been counting my tea. I count most things. It is a feature of immortality. After a certain point, counting becomes involuntary. She borrowed his coat one evening when the heating broke and found that it smelled like cold air and old paper and something under that which she didn't have a name for, but which made her chest do something inconvenient. She didn't give the coat back for 3 days. He didn't ask for it. The first near miss happened on a Wednesday. She was reaching past him for a mug on the top shelf, which required standing on her toes and putting one hand on his shoulder for balance. His shoulder was cold through the fabric. She steadied herself, and her face was suddenly very close to his. Close enough to see that his eyes had small rings of amber around the pupil that she'd never noticed. Close enough to feel the absence of breath from his mouth. They stayed there for 3 seconds too long. Her hand on his shoulder, his hand rising halfway to her waist and then stopping, fingers curling, deciding against it. "Got it," she said, pulling the mug down. "Good," he said. Neither of them moved for another beat. "Ambrose?" "Yes." "You can put your hand down." His hand was still frozen at his side, halfway between intention and restraint. He lowered it with the deliberate precision of someone deactivating something dangerous. The second near miss happened 4 days later. She'd cut her finger chopping onions and sworn loudly, and held her hand under the tap. And when she turned around, he was on the opposite side of the kitchen, pressed against the far wall, with his eyes closed. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am fine." "You're standing against the wall." "I am giving you space." "I cut my finger. It's not serious." "I am aware of exactly how serious it is. Please put a plaster on it." She put a plaster on it. He stayed against the wall for another 2 minutes. When he finally moved, his hands were shaking, and she saw the effort it cost him in the rigid line of his jaw and the white of his knuckles. "Sorry," she said. "Don't apologize. You cut your finger. It is a reasonable human activity." "You looked scared." "I was not scared. I was managing a response that is significantly older than either of us and does not take kindly to being managed." "The blood thing." "The blood thing." He exhaled, a sound that meant nothing because he didn't need air, but that meant everything because he was doing it for her. "It is under control. It is always under control." "I know." "Do you?" "You've been living in this apartment for 2 months, and you've never once been less than completely safe to be around. Even on the kitchen floor, even starving. You told me to step back. You didn't grab me." He looked at her. Something moved in his face. Something he filed away before she could name it. "You're staring at me," she said one evening, not looking up from her textbook. "I was not staring." "You've been looking at me for 11 minutes. I timed it." "I was observing your study technique. It is inefficient." "You were staring." A pause. "Your heart rate changed when you noticed." "Don't tell me my heart rate." "It was an involuntary observation." "Observe involuntarily in the other direction." He didn't. She looked up. He was sitting in the chair across the room in that particular stillness that she now recognized as vampire stillness, where even the air around him seemed to have given up moving. His eyes were on her, gray, steady, and absolutely, completely honest in a way he never was when he was speaking. "Ambrose," she said. "Yes?" "What are we doing?" "You are studying attachment theory. I am sitting in a chair." "That's not what I'm asking." He knew it wasn't. She could see him know it, in the way his jaw tightened and his hands went flat on the arms of the chair. Ghost memory tension, she'd learned. Vampires didn't have circulation to flush or sweat. They had muscles that remembered what it felt like to be afraid. "I don't know what we're doing," he said. I have been alive for a very long time, and I have never had a roommate, and I have never labeled anyone's eggs, and I don't know what that means. It means you labeled my eggs. It means more than that. I know it means more than that. The silence between them was specific. It had weight. It had his heartbeat in it, which she couldn't hear, but he could hear hers. And she knew from the way he looked at her that it was doing something notable. The complication, he said carefully, is that I am what I am, and what I am is not compatible with what you are. Compatible how? In terms of duration. She held his gaze. You mean I'll die? Eventually, yes. Everyone dies eventually. Not everyone He stopped. The sentence hung in the air between them, unfinished, exactly the way it needed to be. Not everyone you what? She said softly. He didn't answer. He stood up, crossed the room, and stopped precisely 18 inches from where she sat. I should not be this close to you, he said. You say that a lot. It is consistently true. Then why do you keep doing it? He looked down at her. His hands were at his sides, still. Not fidgeting, not reaching, just present. Because, he said, you went to the store at midnight and bought me pomegranate juice. And I cannot seem to organize my way past it. She stood up. The distance between them went from 18 inches to 6. His skin was cool, even from here. She could feel the absence of warmth radiating off him the way warmth radiated off other people. Your hands are cold, she said. Always. Can I? He nodded. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers were long, precise, temperature of stone. She held them anyway. He looked at their hands and then at her face, and his expression was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen on a vampire, which was exactly one vampire. But she was fairly certain the sample size was sufficient. Your heart, he said. Don't tell me. It is, I know what it's doing, shut up. She kissed him. He tasted like cold and something mineral and the tea he hadn't drunk. And his free hand came up to her jaw with a gentleness so precise, it felt like he was holding something he was terrified of breaking. His mouth was cold, hers was warm. The contrast was the most alive thing she had ever felt. He pulled back first. His eyes were different, not gray. Something behind gray, darker, ringed with amber that hadn't been there before. That, he said, slightly unsteady, was inadvisable. Probably. I should have stopped it. You kissed me back. I am aware. It was a lapse in judgment. You put your hand on my face. Also a lapse. How many lapses are you planning to have? He looked at her. The amber was still in his eyes, bright and clear and inhuman. As many as you will allow, he said. And it was the most honest thing he had ever told her. They didn't talk about Renault again until they had to. It was a Thursday evening. Sylvie was making pasta. Ambrose was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a journal article she'd recommended, making marginal notes in fountain pen on the quality of the methodology, when his head came up suddenly. Not fast, instantaneous. One moment reading, the next moment motionless and facing the door with an expression she'd never seen. Someone is here, he said. I didn't invite anyone. I know, they're in the hallway. They have been for approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes? And you're mentioning this now? I was determining whether they intended to knock. And? They do not intend to knock. They intend to wait until you open the door. The knock came. Sylvie looked at Ambrose. His face had gone very still, in the way that meant something under his composure had shifted from domestic to something else entirely. Don't open it, he said. Ambrose, please, don't open it. She had never heard him say please. In 6 weeks of cohabitation and 3 weeks of whatever they were now, he had asked, requested, suggested, proposed, and once formally petitioned. He had never said please. She didn't open it. The voice came through the door instead. French accented, mild, cultured, the voice of someone who expected to be listened to. Ambrose, my boy, I know you're in there. I can hear 2 heartbeats, which means one of them is not yours, which means we should talk. Ambrose closed his eyes. Renaud. Chapter 4. The Maker. The conversation happened through the door, not because Ambrose chose it, because Sylvie had not invited Renaud in, and Renaud could not cross the threshold without her word. It was, Sylvie would reflect later, the most useful thing she had ever learned about vampire lore. You could open the door and speak to me like a civilized person, Renaud said. His voice was warm, patient, the kind of patience that had centuries in it. We are speaking, Ambrose said. He was standing 3 feet from the door. He had not moved since Renaud's voice came through it. You are outside, I am inside. This arrangement is acceptable. You've been hiding in a student apartment for 2 months, completing a degree you do not need among humans who cannot know what you are. Your supply chain was so neglected that Brigitte had to make an emergency delivery. Brigitte reported to you. Brigitte has always reported to me. Did you think she was freelance? Ambrose's jaw tightened. 1 beat, 2. Then still again. Sylvie watched the exchange from the kitchen, holding the pasta spoon like a weapon she had no intention of using. Her behavioral psychology training was doing the thing it always did in high-stress situations, observing, categorizing, building a profile. Renaud's vocal patterns, measured, warm, proprietary. The warmth was strategic. He was using it to frame the conversation as concern when the subtext was control. Classic narcissistic attachment style, she thought. He doesn't miss Ambrose, he misses having Ambrose. I came because I am worried about you, Renaud said. You are not worried, you are inconvenienced. Those are not mutually exclusive. In your case, they are. A pause from the hallway. Who is the human? She is not relevant to this conversation. She is relevant because she has a heartbeat and she is in your apartment, and you have been starving yourself rather than feeding in her proximity, which tells me everything about her relevance. Sylvie set the pasta spoon down. My name is Sylvie, she called. I can hear you. Silence. Then, Sylvie, a lovely name. Ambrose, may I come in? No, Ambrose said. At the same moment Sylvie said, no. Another pause, longer. You've told her. She figured it out. She is studying behavioral psychology. She is very good at it. You sound proud. Ambrose didn't answer, but Sylvie saw the muscle at his temple move once and then go still, and that told her everything. I will be in the city for 3 days, Renaud said through the door. I would like to see you. Properly. Without a threshold between us. We have things to discuss. We have nothing to discuss. You left 40 years ago without a conversation. I'm owed a conversation. You are owed nothing. I saved your life, Ambrose. You changed my life. Without my consent. That is not the same as saving it. The silence after that was the kind that had history in it. Sylvie could feel it through the door, through the walls, through the space between Ambrose's careful words and whatever Renaud was carrying on the other side. 3 days, Renaud said. Think about it. His footsteps retreated down the hallway. Ambrose didn't move until they were gone, and then for 30 seconds after that, and then he sat down heavily in the kitchen chair and put his hands flat on the table. He's not going to leave in 3 days, Sylvie said. No. She woke at 3 in the morning because the apartment was too quiet. Not quiet the way it was when Ambrose was reading. That quiet had a presence to it, a settled, occupied quality. This quiet was empty. This quiet was a room that had been left. She got up. The hallway was dark. The kitchen light was off, but the fridge door was open, and in its light she could see Ambrose standing with a bag in his hand, putting blood pouches into an insulated carrier. His 2 suitcases were by the front door. The bookshelf, his bookshelf, the one that had replaced her IKEA one, was untouched. He was taking nothing that she could claim. "What are you doing?" she said. He didn't startle. Vampires didn't startle. But his hand went still on the pouch, and his eyes closed, and she heard him exhale the way he did when he was performing a human behavior to communicate something his body couldn't. "I was going to leave a note," he said. "A note? I have drafted several." He gestured toward the kitchen table. 3 sheets of paper were arranged in a row, each covered in his museum-quality handwriting. She picked up the nearest one. "Dear Sylvie, I write to inform you of my departure from the premises, effective immediately. Please find enclosed 1 month's advance rent and a forwarding address, which will be invalid by the time you read this." She looked at him. "You wrote 'Dear Sylvie' and 'effective immediately' in the same sentence. The second draft is less formal." She picked up the second one. "Sylvie, I am leaving. I am sorry. The eggs are labeled through Thursday." The third draft, he said, was going to be more personal. I had not finished it. She picked up the third. It said, in handwriting slightly less steady than the others, "I don't want to go." She put it down. "You were going to leave, at 3 in the morning, while I was sleeping, with a note that says you don't want to go?" The note is a draft. It was not the final version. "Ambrose, Renault's presence puts you at risk. Every hour I remain here, you are in proximity to a situation that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what I am. What you are is my roommate. I am a vampire whose maker has tracked him to a student apartment. I have brought a 500-year-old predator to your doorstep, Sylvie. The responsible course of action is to remove myself. The responsible course of action is to talk to me about it before packing your bags at 3 in the morning. If I talked to you about it, you would convince me to stay." "Yes. That is why I didn't talk to you about it." She crossed the kitchen. She stood between him and the front door. She was aware, distantly, that she was standing between a vampire and his exit, and that this was the kind of thing people in horror films did before becoming statistics. She was also aware that he had labeled her eggs and counted her tea and held perfectly still while bleeding rather than let his hunger touch her, and that statistics didn't apply to a sample size of 1. "You do not get to leave without a conversation," she said. "That is not how this works." "How does this work?" "You sit down, you put the bag down, you tell me what you're actually afraid of." "I am not afraid." "You're packing at 3 in the morning to avoid a conversation. That's fear, Ambrose. I study this." He set the bag down. He sat. She sat across from him. "What are you actually afraid of?" she asked again. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was stripped of every layer of composure she had learned to associate with him. "I am afraid that he will hurt you to control me. Not because he is cruel, because it is efficient. And I am afraid that if he does, I will do something I cannot take back." "Something like what?" "Something that ends with one of us not existing anymore. And that the one who stops existing will be the version of me you labeled eggs with." She reached across the table and took his cold hand. "Unpack the bag," she said. He unpacked the bag. "He came to take you back. He came to remind me that I belong to him, in his understanding. You don't belong to anyone." He looked up at her. The composure was back, but it was thin. She could see through it to the thing underneath, which was a 182-year-old man who had run away from the person who made him and spent 4 decades pretending the running was over. "Renault is 500 years old," Ambrose said. "He is patient, he is persuasive, and he does not accept outcomes that contradict his preferences. He will not harm you directly, he will simply make it clear that being near me carries a cost that no reasonable person would choose to pay. What kind of cost? Attention from his people, from the world I left. Every vampire I have avoided for 40 years, suddenly aware that there is a human standing next to me who matters. Matters how? Matters enough that I stopped feeding rather than risk being near you while hungry. That is not something my kind does casually. She sat down across from him. What do you want to do? I want to leave. Tonight. I want to take my things and go. And I want Renault's attention to follow me and not you. That's what you want to do, not what you should do. They are the same thing. They absolutely are not. She reached across the table and put her hand on his. Cold, still. Running is what you've been doing for 40 years. It hasn't worked. It was working until I met you. Was it? He didn't answer. His fingers under hers remained perfectly still, but she could feel the tension in them, in the tendons, in the precise restraint of someone who was holding something down with everything they had. He was quiet for a long time, longer than a human would have been quiet. Long enough that she could hear the kitchen clock and the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing on the street below. I need to stop running, he said. She hadn't expected that. She'd been preparing to argue, to lay out the behavioral framework, to explain that avoidance reinforced the dependency cycle. She had a whole speech. He'd skipped it. Say that again, she said. I need to stop running. I have been running for 40 years. I have moved 14 times. I have enrolled in 6 universities. I have constructed an entire life around the principle of not being found. And he found me in 2 months. He looked at the unpacked blood pouches on the counter. If I leave tonight, he will find me again. In another city, another apartment, another set of labeled eggs, and you will not be there. So what do you want to do? I want to call him, tonight, and tell him to come here. Here, to the apartment. To the apartment, where I live. Where I have a roommate and a bookshelf and a self-checkout receipt I have kept because it is evidence of a crime against civilization. He paused. I want him to see what I have, and I want him to understand that I am not leaving it. Ambrose. Your ideas are usually excellent. This one is mine. She looked at him across the table. The third draft was still lying between them. I don't want to go. You'll need me to invite him in, she said. He can't cross the threshold without my word. I know. I am asking you, not telling you, asking. I know you are. That's why I'm saying yes. He took out his phone. It was the newest model, purchased 3 months ago, and he operated it with the focused intensity of someone diffusing an explosive. You have his number? She asked. He has had the same number for 19 years. He considers changing phone numbers to be a sign of weak character. Of course he does. Ambrose pressed call. Sylvie watched the muscle at his jaw tighten as it rang. Renault, he said. Tomorrow evening, 9 o'clock, the apartment. My roommate will invite you in. You will conduct yourself as a guest. A pause. Because I am asking. And because if you cannot behave as a guest in my home, you have no claim to call yourself my maker. He hung up. His hand was steady. His eyes were not. That was very commanding, Sylvie said. I have been practicing. On whom? The self-checkout machine. It responds to authority approximately as well as Renault does. Something loosened in the room. Not everything, but enough. I have a suggestion, Sylvie said, for tomorrow. Your ideas concern me. My ideas are excellent. You just don't like them because they require you to do something other than organize your feelings into a filing system. That is an unfair characterization. It's a behavioral observation, from an expert. Listen, Renault's power over you operates on two mechanisms. The threat, which is, I can reach you any time. And the dependency, which is, you need me, even if you've forgotten. Both collapse if you demonstrate that you've built something real, something he can't undo by showing up. And you want to be in the room when it happens. I want to be in the room because this apartment, this kitchen with the labeled eggs and the self-checkout receipts and the coat I still haven't given back, is mine too. He doesn't just get to walk through it. He looked at her. The composure was thin, but underneath it she could see something that wasn't fear or calculation, or the organizational impulse that governed his entire existence. It was gratitude, the quiet, devastated kind. You are, he said, a profoundly inconvenient person to care about. Thank you. It was not a compliment. It absolutely was. Chapter 5, The Invitation. Ambrose spent the day preparing the apartment as though the Queen of England were visiting, if the Queen of England were 500 years old and drank blood. He cleaned surfaces that were already clean. He reorganized the blood fridge so the labels faced outward. He debated, aloud and at length, whether to offer Renault a glass. A glass of what? Sylvie asked from the sofa, where she was pretending to study. It would be polite. He is a guest. He's a guest because you told him to behave like one. You don't have to serve him. Hospitality is not optional. It is how civilized vampires establish that they are, in fact, civilized. He straightened a jar. I will offer water. He will decline. The gesture will have been made. You're going to offer a 500-year-old vampire a glass of water. It is the thought that counts. Is it? No. But I have nothing else to offer, and I would rather be ridiculous than rude. At 8:30 she found him standing at the bathroom mirror, not looking at his reflection because there wasn't one, adjusting his collar by muscle memory. You look fine, she said. I cannot verify that. I'm verifying it for you. He looked down at his right hand. The silver signet ring Renault had given him the night he was turned, the one she'd noticed on his first day, the one he wore the way other people wore skin. He turned it once. Twice. I've worn this for 182 years, he said. I know. I'm going to give it back tonight. She understood, without him explaining, exactly what that meant. Not a gesture, a severance. Are you sure? I have labeled your eggs. I have survived a self-checkout machine. I have kissed a behavioral psychology student in a kitchen with linoleum flooring. He pulled the ring off. His hand looked bare and strange without it. I think I can manage without a ring from a man who made me without asking. He put it in his coat pocket. Renault came at 9. Sylvie opened the door, said, "Come in," and stepped aside. He was tall, silver-haired, and dressed in a way that made Ambrose's formal grocery attire look like loungewear. He entered the apartment slowly, looking at everything. The labeled jars, the replaced bookshelf, the coat hanging on the back of a kitchen chair. His gaze stopped on the 2 mugs on the counter, one clean and unused, one stained with the evidence of actual drinking. You've built a life, Renault said, sounding surprised. I've built an apartment, Ambrose said. He was standing at the far end of the kitchen, leaning against the counter, composed but not performing composure, just present. It suits you. The labeling is very you. Thank you. Renault sat at the kitchen table without being asked. Sylvie remained standing. She was observing, categorizing, watching the power dynamics play out in posture, in who spoke first, in who filled the silences and who let them sit. You're not coming back, Renault said, not a question. No. And the girl? Her name is Sylvie. You know her name. And Sylvie. A pause. You know what happens to humans who stay with our kind. I know what has happened. I know what can happen. I also know that the decision is hers and mine, and not yours. Renaud looked at Sylvie. His eyes were brown and old, and carried the particular intelligence of someone who had been reading people for 5 centuries. He will outlive you, Renaud said to her. He will watch you age and weaken and die. And when you are gone, he will have no one, again. That's my concern, Sylvie said, not yours. I made him. Everything he is, I gave him. You turned him without his consent in a snowfield during a war. You didn't give him anything. You took something from him and gave him something else instead. And the fact that he survived doesn't mean you get to own the outcome. The room went very still. Not Ambrose still, Renaud still. A different quality of stillness, older and sharper. You've coached her, Renaud said to Ambrose. I haven't. She's a behavioral psychology student. She does this for coursework. She's profiling me. You are remarkably easy to profile, Sylvie said. Your attachment style is anxious avoidant with pronounced narcissistic features, and your primary control mechanism is manufactured dependency. You told Ambrose he needed you because you needed him to need you. That's not parenting. That's a cage. Renaud stared at her. Then he looked at Ambrose, then back at her. I was trying to protect him, he said, and for the first time his voice sounded like it meant it. I believe you think that, Sylvie said, but protection that requires obedience isn't protection. It's a leash. You're 22 years old. Yes. And you're lecturing a 500-year-old vampire on attachment theory. The theory doesn't care how old you are. The patterns are the same at 500 as they are at 50. Ambrose stepped forward. He reached into his coat pocket and set the signet ring on the kitchen table between them. The silver caught the overhead light. It looked old and heavy and exactly like what it was, which was 182 years of belonging to someone who had never asked whether you wanted to belong. That's mine, Renaud said quietly. Yes, and I've worn it since the night you put it on my hand, in a field outside Smolensk, while I was still learning how to breathe without needing to. You're returning it. I am returning it, because I am not yours. I have not been yours for 40 years, and the ring was the last part of me that was pretending otherwise. Renaud looked at the ring, then at Ambrose's bare hand, then at Sylvie, standing by the counter with her arms crossed. Then, unexpectedly, at the labeled eggs on the shelf behind her. You write on the eggs, he said. They have a use-by date. The carton has a use-by date. The carton can be discarded. The egg cannot reference a discarded carton. For a fraction of a second, something moved in Renaud's face that was neither control nor calculation. It was recognition. The specific, unwanted recognition of a man who has been out-organized by his own creation. She will die, Ambrose. I know. And then? And then I will grieve, and I will survive it, the way I have survived everything, including you. Renaud looked at Sylvie again. Something in his expression shifted, not softening, adjusting. A recalculation performed by someone who had been calculating for 5 centuries and had just encountered a variable he hadn't accounted for. You'll need to feed from her eventually, he said to Ambrose, if you're going to stay. That is between us. It's between her blood and your restraint. And I know your restraint, Ambrose. It is excellent, but it is not infinite. Then it will be her choice, not yours. You're choosing mortality, Renaud said. You're choosing to watch her die. I'm choosing her. The rest is detail. Renaud was quiet for a long time. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside a car passed. You sound like me, Renaud said. In 1812. Standing over a dying boy in a field, deciding his future without asking. I am nothing like you. Because when she asks, I will answer honestly. And when she decides, I will respect the decision, even if it is to leave. Renaud nodded. Once. The gesture carried centuries. He picked up the ring from the table and put it in his pocket without looking at it. If you need me, he said. I won't. If you do. Ambrose didn't answer. Renaud adjusted his coat, looked once more around the apartment as though memorizing it, and walked to the door. He stopped at the threshold. The bookshelf is too good for this apartment, he said. I know, Ambrose said. Renaud left. The door closed. The apartment settled around them in the quiet that followed, and Sylvie realized her hands were shaking. Ambrose crossed the kitchen. He took her hands, his cold fingers folding around her trembling ones. You profiled a 500-year-old vampire to his face, he said. It's literally what I'm studying. It was the most extraordinary thing I have witnessed in 182 years. More extraordinary than the self-checkout? Something in his face broke, not composure, something deeper than composure. The careful, organized, labeling, never quite present thing he carried everywhere cracked open, and what was underneath was just a man who had been running for 40 years, and had just, for the first time, stayed. He kissed her, cold mouth on warm, his hand at the back of her neck, careful, precise, and shaking in a way his hands had never shaken before. I would like, he said against her mouth, to stop running. Then stop. I would like to label things in this kitchen for a very long time. Define very long. I am a vampire, Sylvie. My definition of very long is longer than yours. She pulled back and looked at him. We'll figure that out. Yes. Together. Yes. But you're still not allowed to replace the furniture without asking. Agreed. And I'm keeping the coat. I assumed. Chapter 6. The Shelf. 2 weeks after Renaud left, Sylvie offered him her wrist. They were on the sofa. He was reading. She was pretending to read. She held out her arm the way you might hand someone the remote. No, he said without looking up. You're running low. I checked the fridge. I will call Brigitte. You hate calling Brigitte. I will endure calling Brigitte. Ambrose, look at me. He looked at her. His eyes were that darker shade, the one that meant he was hungrier than he would admit. The amber rings were visible. You said it's different, she said. From someone you care about. You said it's like hearing who they are. I said that, yes. I want you to. You don't understand what you're offering. I'm offering my wrist to my vampire boyfriend so he doesn't starve out of stubbornness. It's really not that complicated. Boyfriend. Is that not the word? I have not been anyone's boyfriend in 182 years. Then you're overdue. He set the book down. He took her hand, then he put it back, then he picked it up again. Are you nervous? She asked. I am recalibrating. You're nervous. I have done this before, many times, with people I did not care about. This is different, he paused. Should you be sitting or lying down? I've read that humans sometimes feel lightheaded. You've read about it. I researched the optimal conditions. There is very little literature. Most of it is unhelpful. What did the literature recommend? Hydration, a comfortable position, and I quote, a calm environment. This apartment has never once been calm. It's calm right now. You are present. When you are present, nothing is calm. Things merely appear calm. That is either very romantic or very rude. It is both. They are not mutually exclusive. He turned her wrist up and held it in both of his, and she could see the precision of the restraint, the way every line of his body was controlled, deliberate, chosen. It won't hurt, he said, if I'm careful. Are you always careful? With you, always. He lowered his mouth to her wrist. She felt the cold of his lips first, and then a brief, bright sting, and then something she didn't have words for. Not pain, not pleasure exactly. A sensation of being known, briefly, completely, in a way that bypassed language. Like someone had opened a door she didn't know was there, and looked through it at everything she was, and the looking was gentle. He pulled back after 3 seconds, maybe 4. His eyes were fully amber now, ringed with it, and his mouth was very slightly changed, and he looked at her like she was the most dangerous thing in the room. "Your heart," he said. "Don't tell me. It is doing something remarkable." I said, "Don't tell me." He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, precise, controlled. His eyes faded slowly back to gray. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." She looked at her wrist, 2 small marks already closing. That was a lot." "Yes. The good kind of a lot." "Yes. We should probably not do that in public." "Agreed." She brought it up on a Tuesday. They were sitting on the sofa. She was leaning against him, which she had learned to do without flinching at the temperature differential. He was reading one of her textbooks and making notes that were 2 centuries more informed than the material warranted. "I want to ask you something," she said, "and I want you to not organize your feelings about it before answering." "That is an unreasonable request." "Promise me." "I will attempt to not organize my feelings. This is the best I can offer." "Can you turn me?" He went still, not the everyday stillness, the deep one, the one where even the idea of breathing left the room. "Theoretically," he said. "Practically. Practically, it would require a blood exchange over 3 days. It would be painful. There is a meaningful risk that it does not work." "What happens if it doesn't work?" "You die." She sat with that. She'd expected it. She'd researched it, as much as one could research a thing that wasn't in any textbook. She'd observed him. She'd asked the careful questions, watched his answers, built the model. "And if it works?" "You become what I am. Cold, permanent, unable to eat your cereal, unable to sit in the sun. No more cereal. It is a genuine loss. I recognize this." "What else?" "No more warm hands, no more sleeping. Your heart will beat once per hour, or not at all. You will hear everything. You will smell everything. You will want blood the way you currently want cereal, which is to say, constantly and without dignity." "You've thought about this." "I have thought about it every day since you kissed me in the kitchen. I have organized the pros and cons into categories. The cons are extensive. The pros have 1 entry." "What's the entry?" "You." She almost laughed. Almost. "That's the worst cost-benefit analysis I've ever heard." "I am aware. It would not survive peer review." "I'm not asking you to do it now," she said. "I'm asking if you would. If I asked." He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was lower than she'd ever heard it. "I would. If you asked. If you were certain. If you understood what it costs." "What does it cost?" "Everything you are, and in return you get everything I am. For as long as there is a world to be in." "That's a hell of a trade." "It is a terrible trade. It is also the only one I am able to offer." She took his hand, cold, familiar now. "Not yet," she said, "but eventually." "Eventually," he repeated, like he was filing the words somewhere safe. Ambrose bought a small refrigerator for his blood supply. He put it in the kitchen, next to the regular refrigerator. He labeled every pouch with the date of acquisition, the type, and the optimal consumption window in his 18th century handwriting. Sylvie's yogurt sat on the shelf above. Her leftover pizza sat next to it. His blood sat below, meticulously documented, impeccably organized. It was, she thought, the most honest picture of their life she could imagine. The practical and the impossible, sharing a shelf. She renewed the lease. She added a clause. Roommate acknowledges undisclosed medical condition. No ancient enemies in the kitchen. All furniture replacements subject to prior approval. Ambrose signed it with a fountain pen. This is not legally binding, he said. It's morally binding. I have existed for 182 years. Morality and legality have rarely overlapped in my experience. Welcome to the 21st century. I have been welcomed, repeatedly. The welcome does not improve. She laughed. He watched her laugh. And this time, the expression on his face was not careful, not composed, not filed away for later processing. It was just there. Open. The kind of expression that costs a vampire everything to wear and is worth it. Epilogue. 6 months later. The turning took 3 days. It hurt more than anything Sylvie had ever experienced, including the time she'd broken her ankle at a music festival and walked on it for 6 hours because she didn't want to miss the headliner. Ambrose stayed. He held her hand through all 3 days, cold fingers wrapped around hers as her temperature dropped to match his. He didn't eat. He didn't move. He sat in the chair beside the bed and held on. When it was over, she opened her eyes and the world was different. Sharper. Louder. She could hear the refrigerator humming 3 rooms away. She could hear the neighbor's television. She could hear his heartbeat, one slow pulse, hours apart. Welcome back, he said. He looked terrible. Underfed, gray-skinned, exhausted in the way that vampires got exhausted, which was more in the eyes than anywhere else. You look awful, she said. You died for 6 minutes. I got better. Your sense of humor survived the process. I was hoping it might not. Ambrose. I'm joking. You're not joking. You're relieved and you're expressing it through deadpan because that's how you process all emotions. Your behavioral analysis has also survived. Unfortunate. She sat up. The room tilted and then settled. Everything was too bright, too loud, too much. But his hand was in hers, and it wasn't cold anymore. It was the same temperature as her own. We match, she said, looking at their hands. Yes. Is this what it's like for you? Everything this loud? You adjust. It takes approximately a decade. A decade? I will help you. I have experience with adjustment periods. You spent your adjustment period running from Renault. I will help you adjust better than I did. She swung her legs off the bed. He stood up, steadying her. I'm going to need blood, she said. There are pouches in the kitchen. Labeled. Obviously. Can I label mine? You may label yours. She wrote her name on a pouch. Her handwriting was terrible, exactly as terrible as it had always been, unchanged by immortality. He stared at the label, then at her, then at the label again. Your penmanship, he said, has not improved. Immortality doesn't fix handwriting. Evidently. You'll just have to live with it. For how long? You're a vampire, Ambrose. You tell me. He looked at the shelf, her terrible handwriting next to his meticulous script, her blood pouches next to his. The yogurt she could no longer eat still sitting on the top shelf, because neither of them had remembered to throw it out. For a very long time, he said. I believe that is the arrangement. You believe correctly. He picked up the fountain pen. He uncapped it. He wrote on the yogurt container in his careful 18th century hand. For disposal, no longer applicable. That's technically my yogurt, she said. It is expired, and you cannot eat yogurt. You've been wanting to throw that out for months. I have been wanting to throw it out since the day I moved in. It has been a considerable exercise in restraint. Greater restraint than the blood thing? Comparable. She laughed. He watched her laugh. In the kitchen, with the labeled blood and the expired yogurt and the coat still hanging on the back of the chair, the two of them stood in the ordinary light of a Tuesday afternoon and began the project of forever.